This is Behind the Swipe, the podcast that takes you inside the lives of real men and women over 40 who have taken the plunge into the often murky and sometimes exhilarating world of online dating. Each week, we explore new topics through the experiences and expectations of real online daters just like you. I'm your host, Hoyt Prysock. Join me as we peel back the one-dimensional dating profiles to discover the real men and women behind the swipe. Welcome to Behind the Swipe. This is our inaugural episode, and the topic today is rebound relationships, the pitfalls and the promises. You know, rebound relationships have gotten a bad rap. Almost universally, the advice one is given after the breakup of a long-term relationship is, take time. Don't jump into dating right away. Get to know yourself as a single person again. Until you're comfortable with your own company, you will not be fully available to others. It makes sense, right? So much so that this is often taken as gospel. But what if it's just not true? Research by Claudia Brumbaugh and Chris Fraley of Northwestern University indicate that initiating romantic relationships relatively quickly on the heels of a divorce or breakup can have significant benefits, including bolstering self-confidence, reinforcement of one's sexual and emotional desirability, and a more rapid and healthy letting go of the emotional baggage from the previous relationship. So it appears that rebounds can have positive benefits for the newly detached. But what if you're the one dating the rebounder? Can the pitfalls outweigh the benefits? Investing in a romantic relationship with a newbie might mean leaving oneself vulnerable to a certain level of volatility. This person is only beginning to rediscover who they are as a single person. It's not uncommon to want to build on early successes by sampling more broadly in the dating world. I mean, there are 30 more flavors to try at the Baskin-Robbins. Conversely, the rebounder may feel so positive about the early relationship that they are inclined to think that this is it, I've found my soulmate. Maybe way before you're coming to the same conclusion. Today, we'll hear from online daters on both sides of this equation and understand their real-world experience. So to help me do this, I'm joined today by Bradley Richardson. Bradley is the creator of Advanced Adulting, where he coaches and creates content to help grown-ass adults navigate the shifts and changes of midlife. He's a 5-time best-selling author, speaker, coach, an executive who's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Rolling Stone, on Good Morning America, NPR, and more. A 50-something, fifth-generation Texan and father of 3 grown kids, he lives in Dallas, Texas, and he can be found across social media and the web at I am Bradley Richardson. Bradley, thanks for joining us Behind the Swipe.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here for so many reasons. I love what you're doing and can't wait to dive into this topic.
Well, thanks again. And I really wanted to have you for this first episode because I know that in the work that you do with your advanced adulting programs, that most of the people that you work with are in midlife. They are making transitions, and often those transitions involve getting back into the dating world for the very first time. So you've got a unique perspective on this, and I'm anxious to hear about that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's I say it's unique in that I'm living it. You mentioned the tag there. I help grown-ass adults navigate midlife. And I think one of the things that, let's put it this way. It's unique in that not many people address it, but it is so common. Whether it is all the shifts and changes and transformations that all of us go through, men and women, it's not gender specific, that all of us go through in our 40s, 50s, and beyond. They're the things that we all encounter, but nothing really prepares you for. You may know in the back of your mind that it may come, but when you're 23 years old, you don't think about, well, I wonder what it's going to be like to be divorced, or I wonder what it's going to be like to date in my 50s. Who you are at 23 is a dramatically different human being than at 53. And so the things like we're talking about today and all these other relationship issues are no one prepares you for, but we all encounter it. So I'm glad. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad to do that you're doing this work.
Well, that's great. So here's what I'd like to do, Bradley. So I've had a number of conversations with men and women who have expressed hesitation around dating someone who's newly divorced or out of a long-term relationship, and for legitimate reasons. And this research that I just referred to, I will post this in the show notes as well, but there's a very interesting article that was just published in The Atlantic that really challenges this notion that if you've come out of a long-term relationship, you really need that extra time to really get to know yourself before you get out there and start dating again. And oftentimes you'll hear people talk about, the equivalent of a grieving period, right? So a year, more than a year. And, you and I both know people who have done that, who have waited the time and are thankful that they did. But we also know people whose experience was just the opposite. I'm out of this. I'm ready to jump in. One conversation that I had, and we'll call him Paul, really typifies this approach that said, I've come out of this long-term relationship. There was not much intimacy. There was not much fun, and I'm ready for something. So I'm going to jump back in. So I thought there were some really interesting perspectives here. So what I'd like to do is let me play a couple of clips. I'm going to get an introduction as Paul talks about himself and how he views online dating. So tell me your story.
So, interestingly, I've been on the dating scene twice between marriages. I was married twice, was married the first time 8 years, and the second time I was married for 15 years, something like that. You can tell I'm really impressed by it. And, something like 15 years. And, the first time when I was out dating, there were no apps, or anything like that. And after I was divorced in 2020, I ended up thinking about what I wanted to do to meet other people, and realized, especially with, COVID and all that it was really a time to look at apps and see if there's a way that you could meet, ladies that way.
And so how long after your divorce did you first decide, okay, I'm going to get on the apps?
It was pretty quick, probably within a month. And I was probably observing the apps and just seeing how they worked and stuff prior to the finalization of the divorce. But I guess it was really relatively soon thereafter, after the divorce was finalized. And my divorce took almost a year to go through. So I had a lot of practice time and looking at the dating apps and all that.
So it was over a year from the time that you two had decided to divorce until you were actually on the apps. So you
That's
were
right.
You were on your own. Were you dating at all during the period before the finalization of the divorce?
Yeah. Some, but not really anything formal. It wasn't an active decision that I made that, hey, you know what, I need a year to kind of figure out who I am and all that before I date somebody. It was more of a, hey, you're going through a divorce, probably best to really hold off on dating until you are officially divorced. And I think that would probably be echoed through, people that you may have met or were talking with or whatever. They prefer you to be divorced versus someone who's separated and in a divorce process.
So how common is that, Bradley, in your experience, for a man to jump right in after a relationship?
I would say that your guest there is fairly evolved in his his initial, at least contemplating taking a break or hitting the brakes rather before jumping in. I'd say I would say the majority, but I want to rephrase it and say probably the urge is rather, oh hell, let's do this. Let's just jump in the pool both feet and go. And for a multitude of reasons, and you referenced that article earlier. I think some of it is to stave off the feelings of rejection, to especially if you've been in a relationship that had a lack of intimacy, a lack of love or communication, and you felt on the outs, whether it's men or women. I mean, the bulk of my, I have several 100,000 people, worldwide and, following and that I work with. About 70% of those are women. And I can tell you that a lot of them, there's a lot of contemplation that goes on, but if you're coming out of years in a loveless, in community, poor communication, you're going to jump back in, It's funny thing though, is interesting. I can speak from personal experience as well. Men appear to be, they're more willing and apt to jump in faster than a woman. They tend to be less bitter about it than I say that based on my clientele. There's a lot of people going, oh, hell no, I'm not doing this again. But others are just like, I'll jump back in. And, I said, I know from my personal experience too. There's reasons why, and we can talk about those, about why they do it. But I think it's fairly common.
Well, I think that, in my personal experience, I had come out of a marriage that was 27 years, right? And I did not know who I was as a single, unattached human being. So this, for me, my rebound relationship taught me a hell of a lot about who I was in this new world. And I think you heard Paul sort of, echoing, some of that. I'm curious, Bradley, though, you mentioned that probably, 70% of the people that you work with are women. Do you find an exception? Are you coming across circumstances where the women are saying, they are feeling the same thing? I want to get right back into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's the funny thing. Okay. So again, I'm fairly direct. For people that aren't familiar with me, we'll just cut right to it. You don't call it grown ass adults for a reason. Here's the thing. It's easy to sit there and take the high road oftentimes and claim what you should do, and it should be right. And, I think it's interesting because we have this supposition that, well, you should take all the time off and you should wait and you shouldn't rush into things. And yet that article, the Atlantic article, was talking about that science may debunk some of that. And I think the thing is, I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily as much of a gender issue, because I have, there are countless women out there who are like, you know what? Yeah, I don't want a relationship. I don't want a man. I don't want to be involved. I just want to go play and have fun. I want some attention. I don't want any strings. And, here's the funny thing. I do get a lot of comments. I coach a lot of people, a lot of women who are like, I can't believe that man he doesn't want a commitment. He just wants sex. Like, well, yeah, but you know what? I know I have an equal amount of women who are like, yeah, I'm down for that too. And here's the point. This is the critical point to this. That's okay. That is okay. The idea is whether you want a serious, committed relationship that's exclusive and monogamous, fantastic. Good for you. And if you are saying, you know what, I've been married for the past 27 years. And you know what? I just want to go to the buffet. I want to have fun. I don't know what I don't know. I want to go, I consider the online apps sometimes, I call them the adult version of the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese. Okay. It's kind of fun, kind of gross, but jump in. And I think that's the case. A lot of people, men and women, they're like, you know what? I've been bored. And I just, it's some me time and I'm going to go have fun. And here's the catch, as long as you are open and honest about that with yourself, and most importantly, with the people you encounter, there is not a damn thing wrong with what you want. You want what you want, and that's cool. But be honest and upfront with yourself and with the other person. And if you are aligned and you're like, I'm down for fun, and the other person is too, then go have a good time and do it. The problems occur when you're not aligned.
I couldn't agree with you more. And that's a great segue, because one of the next pieces of the conversation that I had with Paul, he gets into exactly why he wanted to do this and how that process was for him. Take a listen. I'm curious about your experience when you turn the app on for the first time and say, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to date, I'm going to engage with people here.
Right.
And I'm going to date. How did your actual experience map against whatever expectations you did have when you started?
Yeah. So I think it's first off important to kind of level set what the expectations were, because they change over time through the dating app, right? So as I had said, when you first get on there, you're not looking for a long-term. I wasn't looking for a long-term relationship. I was looking for someone that, I could, go out with and enjoy time with, but as well, there was intimacy and all that involved as well. And probably more so to that side,
Yep.
So, it was kind of like, who can I meet? Who can I go out with? And, and that kind of thing. And I'd say my expectation changed over time as I kind of got some of that sowing of the oats out of my system, so to speak. I mean, that's probably a crude way to say it, but that's what it was.
How long did that take? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious about how long that sowing of the oats period lasted for you.
Wow. I don't know exactly. It was an evolution. It was very much an evolution where you kind of started to, in the back of your mind, saying, I'm looking for something I can, a relationship that I can sink more teeth into, and spend more time with this person and really, get to know them and, could be potentially a long-term partner. But I didn't come to that until later, but it grew over time, my desire for that versus, I just want to meet somebody that, I can go back to my place with and all that. So I don't know where it was in that process, I mean, you always have that, as a guy, I think that you always kind of have that, you're actively looking for someone that you can go back to your place with throughout the process. I mean, that's part of the process. But then when I met the girl that I'm with now, and, I'd actually dated some other people for several months, in there too, there was a different kind of connection, and someone you're like, hey, you know what? This is the kind of person that I like who they are. I kind of like their values. I like what they stand for. We have a lot in common. We laugh a lot. And this is someone I really kind of want to explore whether it makes sense to have a longer term relationship with the person.
So what's your take? Well, here's what I heard out of that Paul was dating for sex. Paul was dating for sex. When he got on the apps, he was saying, I am wanting to sleep with a lot of women. That's what it sounded like. And it was interesting to hear him evolve in his thinking over that period of time.
It is. Okay. So I'm going to put a different spin on it. Again, I'm not in Paul's head, but I have had enough conversations, and I too have been there and done that. Okay. Several times. And here's the thing. I'm going to replace, and I think we say, oh, they're just doing it for sex. Of course. Well, you know what? There are people out there that just are. And again, that's okay. But I think when you really take a look at it, what you're really, let's exchange that word sex for attention or connection. That's really what it is. Now that may be with your clothes on or with your clothes off. But if you're coming out of a crappy relationship, because that's really what you're doing. I mean, you've been single for a long time and you're either lonely or you're coming out of a bad relationship, marriage, whatever. And, it is I have not had attention for a long time. This is very much a male perspective too. Okay. Because I get questions from my clients, my female clients are like, well, why are this guy, he's talking to so many women and, why doesn't he get back? Because he's probably come out of a marriage of 27 years where they haven't had sex in the past 4 years. She thought he was an idiot. He's been berated. And suddenly you go online, you're drinking from a fire hose. And oh my God, you go on one night in 45 minutes, you swipe right enough times or left enough, whichever. It's been a while since I've done that, but you swipe And you get, oh my God, an hour later, I'm having conversations with 20 attractive women who actually think I'm not a troll. This is pretty good. They're not sitting there thinking, how can I get laid? They're thinking, I am validated. I have value. I am seen, heard, and appreciated. And that goes both ways for men and women. But I think that's really it. And he said something important. You asked a good question. He said something pretty important. How long does that last? Okay. It lasts until, because I did this. Okay. I mean, the Cliff Notes version on one of my excursions in this came out of I didn't go on the apps right after I got divorced. Okay. That's a different story. But I went after a long-term relationship. I went on the apps and I am loaded for bear. Okay. I'm going to see not how much I can get laid. That would, people don't like to talk about this. Getting laid's easy. If you're a man or a woman, if you're a human being that can actually conjugate a verb and have a full set of teeth, you can get laid. Okay. That's not the issue. The issue is attention, engagement, and connection. And for me at the time, I was like, you know what? I've been treated like crap. So here I'm just going to go through and my wall is up. I am callous. Nobody's hurting me. I'm not saying this is healthy. I'm just saying this is a very mindset. And so, I'm getting attention and attraction, and I'm going to do this as long as I possibly can. I'm going to ride that train. And again, be clear to your listeners. This is not about going to get laid or with a purpose. This is, I like the attention. I want to see what's out there. Okay. Now, when's the transition? When do you shift? Well, you shift when you are two things. When you're tired of hearing and saying the same damn story over and over and over again. Because again, if you've been on the apps or dated for a while, there's only so many times you can say, well, tell me about yourself. Oh my gosh, again. Okay. So that's one of them. And the other is when you just realize you start seeing, I call them retreads. Okay. You start to see the same people over and over again on the apps. Okay. They go off for a little bit and they come back on. You're like, oh geez, I've seen this person again. Or you start hearing the same story again and again and again, meaning, and this is, a little bit of a segue or off topic, but it's the idea of, the most common conversation or question in the first date at midlife, it seems to be is, tell me about your former relationship, which I think is lunacy. Okay. Is absolutely stupid. Because why? Because it then becomes an hour of, instead of getting to know that person and having a connection or engagement, I get to hear what a son of a bitch and narcissist the ex was. And it's a horrible, horrible thing. And so I think, long way around the block of, it's not just sex. It's about a connection and engagement and attention that they weren't getting. You're looking for something that you weren't getting before at surface level. And then with time, and then as you figure yourself out, you're like, I want more. I deserve more. And that's the evolution.
That's great. And so we're going to take a break here. And when we come back, I'd like to explore the other side of this, because we've got a couple of perspectives from daters who have had negative experience in dating someone like Paul, right? And people who have said, I don't have the time for that. So we'll dig into that in just a moment, right after the break. Behind the Swipe is made possible by real online daters just like you, willing to share their personal and authentic stories and perspectives as they seek love, romance, and intimacy online. Head on over to behindtheswipe.com. Click the Be a Guest link at the top of the page. There, you'll learn about some of our upcoming episode topics and how you can help. So we are back, and I'm here with Bradley Richardson. Bradley is the creator of Advanced Adulting, and you can find him online on every social media platform at I Am Bradley Richardson. Bradley, welcome back.
Thank you.
So I want to kind of turn the tables a little bit and look at the dark side of dating a rebound person like Paul that we met in the first half of the show. When I say dark side, I mean, what are the negative aspects of being on the other side of the rebound relationship? There can clearly be positive aspects to that, but we've got a couple of perspectives from conversations that I've had from some women that say that they'll never do that again. They try to filter that out very early on in conversation, often swiping left if they can detect that in a profile early on. So let's hear from Sharon. Sharon is from Colorado, and her perspective is that she's been burned once and she doesn't want to be burned again. I remember you telling me that it was a red flag for you when someone was newly divorced and didn't have things figured out. Come back in a year after your freshman year, right?
Yes. I always say try to be the second or third. You don't want to be the first. Sometimes men just want to go right into the next relationship. That does happen also.
So did you learn this lesson just intuitively, or did you have an experience of that taught you?
Oh, yeah. I had a few experiences of that in both manners, actually. Men that are divorced and just seeking their next partner right away. And then also some that just the first one is the hardest one to take. It's like an experiment. Someone that's been in a long relationship and then they're back out on the market. And then, they have to get their feet wet. They can't just, they might think that they want to be involved with the first person, but I think they have to, it's too soon. I always think it's too soon.
And did you, in the cases that you recall where that was the circumstance, were they, so I've seen things happen a couple of different ways, right? One is that this is all brand new to them. They probably come out of a long-time relationship or a marriage or something where they, there's not been a lot of communication, not a lot of intimacy, not a lot of fun. And so it's like, wow, kid in a candy shop.
Yes, like they're, reborn.
And so your experience of that is, that's fine. You should do that, but just not with me.
Exactly. How I feel about it is that I think that people need to be more healed before they pursue another relationship. And usually that's not the case. Also, I think dating someone just out of a divorce, there's still blowback and there's still remnant and they're not quite out of the woods. And I think it's when it's still fresh, as much as they want to move on, it still lingers. And I think it takes time and a couple of relationships to work out all of that and be sure that you're ready for the next one. I mean, if you want to just have fun, that's great. And if you want to help a man heal, then great. But that's really what you're going to be. You're going to be experimentation for them to start dating again because they don't know what they're doing. And it's all new to them. And they could also be looking for the qualities that they were missing in their marriage and focusing on that, whether they weren't intimate or they weren't having any fun. And so then that's not really exactly who they are. It's really just the deficiency of whatever they were experiencing before. But yeah, I would say beware fresh out of the frying pan, and to some people, and I think women also, they are just unleashed because they've been locked up or unhappy for so long. And then once they get the taste of freedom, that might not necessarily end up who they really are. I think it's natural to kind of go crazy for a little while and then settle into, okay, what do I really want?
So legitimate, right? Bradley?
I mean, absolutely.
Look, this is someone who clearly knows what she wants. She's clearly knows what doesn't work for her and has had these negative experiences. How common do you think that is?
It's very common. I mean, I love how you said that, and it's accurate of knowing what works for her. And I think that's really important is knowing, when we say find yourself, know yourself, I mean, that doesn't mean some giant cosmic journey. It's just a matter of knowing where you're at in your stage of growth, your life, and what you will accept and not accept. Someone who is just coming out of a relationship and, you're a quick rebound for them. They really miss their old life. They may miss being married. They may miss being a couple. They may miss the lifestyle that they had before. And so it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. that they're going to try and make you fit. And it could be anything from someone who was married and their husband was a bad father. Well, if you're a good father, oh, God, you're fantastic. Or you had a certain lifestyle, now you don't have that. It's the idea of, and I use the insert guy here theory, calling it like when you buy a picture frame. You go to the store, you buy a picture frame. It'll have most often a picture of this, sweet family or a gorgeous man or woman inside. You know nothing about them. They're nameless, but they fit that frame. And that's a giant red flag for someone who's just coming out of a relationship. Is they want someone to fill that hole, and it may be you, but it's not really you, the person. It's you, the form, the picture, you check the boxes, and that can lead to a lot of problems, and is a very empty feeling and an empty red flag to look out for.
So what you're saying there is that people in these situations often find themselves prone to projecting an outcome that's entirely in their heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
And expecting that relationship to conform to that without doing the work to understand who that person really is.
Every situation, one of the things that I hear often, and I'm very quick to deal with nearly anybody on social media or clients of mine, when they're like sweeping generalizations. All men do this. My ex-husband cheated, so all men are cheaters. My ex-husband left for a younger woman. All men love younger women. Okay. All women are gold diggers. These giant sweeping things. Well, here's the deal. You tend to find what you project and look for. So for example, if you're dealing with someone who's coming out of a recent relationship and it's you are the rebound. If all you hear from them are negative statements about the gender, or their ex, that's a problem, because they're going to be projecting that onto you. Well, you say you're not there, but it's just a matter of time when you cheat. It's whenever it happens. Okay. You haven't got to know the other person yet. Okay. And you're bringing this on me. Every situation, every encounter, every person is unique. That's it. And you need to approach it that way. And like I said, people project negatively and positively. Oh my God, you're fantastic. Okay. Well, you're just overlooking. You have blinders on at that point. So it's both ways. You have to really look for it. And I think you don't want people who are jaded. You don't want people who are Pollyanna. And I think that's the benefit of time. And also the benefit of going to the buffet a lot. I mean, so it's okay to take your time and jump in, but look, be aware of the positive, the negative. And we talked about at the beginning, know where you bring to the table and what you want. And then you're going to be able to have everything aligned. I had you can cut this if you want, but Hoyt and I know each other personally. Yeah. And when I was in Atlanta, I had a woman tell me that, it was like, you are so amazing and you are a train wreck. You've got your head somewhere else. And, when you get that out of your system, you call me.
Well, we're
fair, totally fair.
Train wrecks at various points in our lives, aren't we?
We all are. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's another perspective. So I met this woman named Mary, and Mary had a slightly different take on this. And that is that she didn't have these hard and fast rules, was really kind of naive about the experience of a newly divorced man in this case. And after 2 or 3 dates, discovered that he really was still holding a candle for his ex. And rather than tell her story, let's hear from her. So Mary, I know you said you had waited about 2 years after your divorce before you started dating online, but have you found yourself in situations where you decided to date someone who was recently divorced?
Yes. Well, I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but yes. In fact, actually, it was worse than that. I had come across a profile on Bumble of a good-looking guy about 3 or 4 years older than me, and I could tell that he'd already swiped right on me. To be honest, from my read of his profile, he seemed to be exactly like the kind of man I was hoping to meet. So I swiped. And within a few hours, we were texting a lot. There was like a flurry of text conversations. And by the next day, we had agreed to meet for a date. And I think it was a coffee shop get to know you date. And it went great. And I was starting to convince myself that there could be something here. And then on our second date over dinner, we started chatting about our previous significant relationships. And he casually tells me that his divorce should become final in the next few months. So that should have set off alarms for me. But because I had already allowed myself to begin imagining a fairy tale romance with this guy, those alarms were silenced. It still bothered me, but I kept telling myself just to trust him, trust in the process. And I think we went on one more date after that, which was also great. And then radio silence. I would occasionally text him, but I wouldn't get any response. I just kept thinking he's probably busy with work. And after about a week, I accepted that I had been ghosted. I, for days, kept replaying our conversations in my head, and I was rereading the text threads. A little embarrassing. I just kept wondering if I said something or did something that turned him off. I wanted to know what was going on, but there was nothing. Then, about 3 weeks later, totally out of the blue, I get this apologetic text from him. But there was a kicker. He had gotten back together with his not yet ex-wife.
Ouch, that's got to sting.
Yes, it did. Still does. I don't want to say that this experience jaded me, but now I learned to cut to the chase with guys up front. I'm never going to let myself get emotionally invested in someone until I know they are actually available. I just can't do that.
So Bradley, that's got to be painful, right? You go through, you are projecting this relationship, this person is perfect for me, early on, just discovering who we are, only to find out that, no, they never processed that previous breakup. And worse than that, it got repaired in the meantime.
Yeah. I think we're talking about two sides of the same coin. So there is the never got over. Okay. That can be forever. That could be a long, long time. That could be a year into it. And that is awful. That's unfortunate, but that's a different issue. Is it solvable? Yes. But that's something that you really cannot identify as much. However, the other side of the coin, people just screw themselves over all the time with this, because it's kind of like, look, if you see a dog that is growling and snarling at you, don't go pet the damn dog. Okay. It's simple. And so you've got someone who, people say, well, they're separated. Should I go out with them? No, you should not. Okay. You can go or here's the thing. Let me back up on this. You should go have fun. You should totally go have fun. That's great. But you should not fall for them. You should not take it seriously. You should wait. Why? For that exact reason that the person, because either one of two things. Either one, it could get resolved. Okay. It could get resolved. Or you're asking for a handful of problems because you're still dealing with all that. Okay. So the point is, make sure that it is done, dead, and buried. But like I said, you don't pet the growling dog. And oh my, well, that's not a dog. That's a growling dog with fleas. I mean, when you have someone who's just still intertwined with somebody, no, go have fun, but don't you dare get serious.
Life is too short for that, right?
Yeah. Don't get serious. Yeah. It's like they say, okay, horrible examples, but you know what? You date the bad boy and the stripper. You don't marry them. Okay. It's kind of the same thing. So just know what you're in for.
So, Bradley, that's a perfect spot for us to kind of end this in this conversation. But I want to tell you how much I appreciate your spending some time and helping us put some perspective on this issue, which is really huge for so many people in midlife out there that are coming out of long-term relationships. And
Well, I love the work you're doing. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I do hope you'll join me again on some other episode in the not too distant future.
Anytime you ask, I'm here. You bet.
All right, Bradley, I'm going to let you go. Thanks so much. And again, remind people where they can find you online.
I'm Bradley Richardson. I do most of my things on Instagram and TikTok. I don't dance or sing, but lots of tips. And we have a membership community with people all over the world. And we have expanded content, lessons, Q&A. And that's on Patreon at I'm Bradley Richardson as well. So you can join that.
Well, you're really a treasure, my friend. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
If you're enjoying Behind the Swipe, you can subscribe to our weekly episode feed on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Instagram at Behind the Swipe Podcast. Got an over 40 dating story? We'd love to hear it. Just go to behindtheswipe.com and click on the Be a Guest tab. We just might feature you on one of our upcoming episodes. I'm your host, Hoyt Prysock. Until next week, swipe fearlessly.